days, 3D animated features are the rule, not the exception. If an animated movie is coming out soon, then it is almost guaranteed to be CG. Certainly there are some exceptions, such as stop-motion animation, but the industry is overwhelmingly CG-oriented. The greatest animation companies of our time work exclusively in 3D. DreamWorks, Blue Sky, Sony Pictures, and even Disney. Yes, even the kings of animation have changed their practices to modern CG. But when did this happen? Making an entire studio go from making 2D animations to 3D animations is no easy feat. How did Disney navigate the experimental shift from traditional 2D animation to computer-generated 3D animation? To answer that question, we'll have to turn back all the clocks and travel far back in time to... Oh, we're already here.
This is how we do it.
The year is 1995. Radiohead had recently released their album, The Bends, and the Sega Saturn just came out to compete with the Super Nintendo. Also, a fair amount of the people watching this were either not born yet, just born, or only a year old. The Disney Renaissance was in full swing, with Lion King killing it at the box office and Pocahontas on track for a June release. Lion King became the highest-grossing animated film of all time, surpassing Aladdin, which held the previous record. Things were looking fantastic for Disney. But while Disney's animation studio was producing wonderful and creative 2D animations, they were also helping produce a very different kind of movie, with a much lesser-known studio. The company, called Pixar, was all about 3D computer animation, and came to Disney with the insane idea to make a fully 3D animated movie. Now, at this point in time, the animation industry didn't really think 3D animation could possibly be taken seriously, and Disney had their doubts. But Pixar had a dedicated and creative crew, led by a passionate man.
And his name is John
Lasseter. John Lasseter, that's his name. Disney created an extremely one-sided partnership with Pixar, saying Pixar could make the movie as long as Disney got all the rights for it. Pixar really didn't have a choice since they had no money and they were facing bankruptcy, so they took the deal and worked on the creation of Toy Story. At the time, a common complaint of computer animation was that it did not look lifelike, but Pixar animators followed the teachings of Disney Studios to make the characters charming and interesting. Toy Story came out in November of 1995. How well did it do? I don't know. Let's check the box office. It was ridiculously successful, making over $361 million worldwide and winning 3 Academy Awards. The success of Toy Story immediately captured the attention of the industry, and suddenly the rush was on to create 3D computer-generated feature-length films. But the chief executive officer of Disney, Michael Eisner, was unconvinced. Eisner played a big part in Disney's recent resurgence, and said that they should continue making 2D animated films moving forward. Besides, they still had Pixar in a 3-picture deal. They would be fine as long as Pixar continued producing CG films. But it didn't quite go as they planned. As the Renaissance came to a close in 1999, and with CG becoming so much more popular in the animation industry, Disney Studios needed a change in pace. In order to keep up with the blockbuster films coming out, they needed to change their image a bit. Chris Pallant, author of Demystifying Disney, names the next 5 years the Neo-Disney period, the first movie to come of it being Fantasia 2000, released in 1999. Don't know why they couldn't have waited a year so the title would make sense, but alright. Fantasia bolstered a new, more cartoony art style that Disney hadn't really used. Disney was always about realism in the past, or at least trying to capture it. But now Disney's studio was going in a less real, more exaggerated sort of filmmaking. To start the trend, they released The Emperor's New Groove in 2000. A funky and sarcastic flick, it came with self-aware comedy, more stylized animation, and was a total departure from anything Disney had released in the past. But the 2D animation did not cause as much of a stir as they hoped. Trying not to be closed-minded, they attempted to use some CG assets in the 2001 hybrid film Atlantis: The Lost Empire. They fused the two mediums together by producing 3D models and using computers to superimpose the 2D characters onto them. A great example of this was done in the 1999 classic, The Iron Giant. But with DreamWorks releasing Shrek and Pixar releasing Monsters, Inc., the movie floundered and had lackluster numbers at the box office. Critics began to believe that Disney's 2D animations could no longer compete with 3D, and that working in 2D was going to be their downfall. In Hybrid Animation by Tina O'Haley, she talks about line mileage. When Disney Studios has to draw so many frames for an animation, the artists end up drawing miles and miles of lines. To keep this from getting out of control, they keep characters simple and easy to animate. But with 3D characters, they can remain complex, and animators can animate them more effectively. Disney attempted to add more 3D, like the spaceships in 2002's Lilo and Stitch, and even having a main character's entire right arm be rendered in 3D in Treasure Planet of the same year. All these hybrids led to beautiful and creative animations, but they just could never compete with the fully 3D features being pumped out by multiple studios, including Pixar. Do you remember Michael Eisner? You know, the chief executive officer of Disney at the time? Well, he actually was shown the works in progress for Pixar's Finding Nemo in late 2002. Unimpressed, he stated that it was going to be Pixar's downfall and that Pixar was in for a reality check. But as unimpressed as he was, to this day, box offices shudder in fear as they recall the infamous day that Finding Nemo premiered on May 30th, 2003. Finding Nemo made a whopping $936.7 million in the box office, literally 10 times the amount put into the movie's production. At this point, Roy E. Disney, Walt Disney's nephew, resigned from his position on the board of directors, but not without making a point first. He wrote a letter of resignation and had it hand-delivered to Michael Eisner's house. The letter had a list of reasons why Eisner should retire as well, and blamed him for, and I quote, "the creative brain drain of the last several years, which is real and continuing, and damages our company with the loss of every talented employee." Roy blamed Disney's recent failures on Eisner, and even went so far as to say, "The Walt Disney Company deserves fresh, energetic leadership at this challenging time in its history, just as it did in 1984 when I headed a restructuring, which resulted in your recruitment to the company." And as if on cue, Pixar announced that it would no longer work with Disney after their contract expired in 2004. Steve Jobs voiced his opinions on Disney, stating that they often hindered creativity and abused the staff of Pixar. This was the final straw for Disney's board of directors, and internal conflicts resulted with Eisner being kicked out for leading them astray. In late 2004, Disney claimed that they were going to make strictly 3D CG movies from that point forward, and not going back. The Walt Disney Company began relying on their theme parks and television shows to produce most of their revenue, and neglecting their animations. But Eisner's successor, Robert A. Iger, saw it a different way. Iger thought that Disney's animated feature films are what made Disney, Disney. With that in mind, he wanted to revive the part of their company that he thought they owed the most to. In a bold move in 2006, Iger suggested acquiring Pixar for $7.4 billion. After releasing Chicken Little in 2005 with less than stellar reviews, both companies agreed to the deal, and Pixar's John Lasseter was put in charge of all of Disney's animation productions. Disney may have technically acquired Pixar, but Pixar was who was really in charge. Iger hoped that Lasseter could breathe life into Disney's failing studios again. Lasseter, seeing this, said he had no bad blood between the companies, and worked with Disney to produce 3D CG movies. So things were going the way Disney wanted them to, and Disney was now releasing Pixar's highly marketable and successful 3D movies, and they weren't looking back. That is, until someone approached John Lasseter about making a new 2D Disney movie called The Princess and the Frog. Rather than telling them to make it 3D or going against their ambitions, Lasseter welcomed it with open arms, and in 2009 Disney released their first 2D animated movie in half a decade. It did very well in the box office and was extremely successful. Even in a highly competitive 3D market, Disney proved that they could still make 2D work, and make it work well. Disney's animation studio still enjoys working with and integrating 2D into their productions. Their recent short, Paperman, for instance, uses a hybrid of 2D and 3D to create something truly unique. Another short called Feast also featured this hand-drawn yet 3D animation style, both of which got fantastic recognition for their creativity and beautiful aesthetics. Disney did not transition from 2D to 3D with a lot of grace, and there were a lot of struggles. But in the end, Disney proved that they can use 3D in releases such as Frozen, Tangled, and even most recently Zootopia, yet still be the only company to create successful 2D feature-length films in such a competitive atmosphere. It wasn't easy getting to where they are today, but with Pixar by their side and creative people on their staff, they have a bright future ahead of them.